Imagine you have an ISO or API management system that all your employees are actively engaged. Wouldn't you like that? Learn the number one thing you need to do to have a successful management system, even if you have experts on hand or if you will be hiring experts. I will tell you what exactly is needed, who needs this in your company, and why this is absolutely needed regardless of everything else. So you're ready to start your ISO or API certification journey, and you want to do it right? Everybody wants to do a good job. So your company allocated a budget to hire a QA manager or an HSE manager or an expert that can help you full-time with your ISO or API certification. But the question that you have is, how do you know if they are good? Or you hire a consultant, the ultimate expert in the ISO or API world, the last Coke in the desert, and now the consultant says, one of the first things you need to do is, wait for it, train your personnel. Train your personnel, including yourself and the champion you hire. Well, now you say,
well, that's baloney. That's a waste of money. That's why I hired you. Why should I spend the money?
relax. Grab a cup of coffee, tea, or maybe a 0-calorie water. And let me explain to you the reason why training you, your champion, and your employees is essential to the success of your API or ISO certification. So let's start with the elephant in the room, the consultant. Here comes the consultant, nice, polished, shiny. See, some consultants may tell you exactly what you need to do without even trying to understand your processes or adapt the requirements to your company processes or your company culture. They might even try to get you to do something they did in their previous jobs, which it could have been a mega company that they work for with infinite resources, like lots of employees, lots of departments, lots of managers. That's not going to work for you, perhaps, if you don't have the same amount of resources. Or maybe it might work at the beginning, but by next year, you will not even be able to follow it, to do it, because you may not have the same amount of manpower. See, when you know nothing about ISO or API, you or your employees are not able to challenge the consultant, right? Because you don't know it. You will just take their word for it, and you will just do whatever he or she says, regardless of how silly that may be or how non-value added it may seem to you for your company. When you have not been properly trained, you will kind of feel embarrassed to ask even the simple questions. Let's just pretend the consultant gave you a silly job of creating 10 checklists. You might even not feel like saying, "Excuse me, Mr. Consultant, why do we need 10 checklists for?" Or you might not even feel like even asking, "Explain to me the value that this brings, or how can we meet this requirement with something that truly adds value to our company?" You see, without the proper training, you don't have the knowledge or the guts to ask those kind of questions, simple questions, because you're going into this whole exercise or project kind of blind. You don't know the question to ask. You don't know if your question is important or not because you just don't know what you don't know, perhaps. Lord forbids your consultant is like a bad pool builder, because if that's the case, then he or she could totally steer you into doing things that are either not good for your company, not suitable for your company culture, or worse yet, not sustainable in the long run. Something that you may do now, but you will not do by next year, it'll be gone. And this is how companies end up with management systems that are either totally not suitable for them or that nobody follows. But let's back up for a minute. We were talking about the elephant in the room, the consultant. But without the knowledge of ISO or API, how would you even have hired that consultant? What kind of questions would you have asked? Because once again, you just don't even know what questions to ask. You got it? So you need some training. You need training. But what about your employees? Do they need training? Yes, they do. They might not need in-depth training like maybe you do or your champion may need, but they need to know a little bit about ISO or API or the standard that you're going to be certified to. After all, this is what the people are doing the job, right? So they need to know what are all these new people you're bringing? What are these consultants or champions or experts that you're bringing? So they have the right to know, and you have the duty to include them and involve them from the beginning if you want them to embrace the management system, to be part of the management system, and to be actively engaged in the management system. Let me tell you, if you don't involve them, they will think that you are perhaps running some kind of secret society, a clique. You have your own little project there, the ISO project, and that probably you stand to gain a lot, not them. And let's face it, one day you're going to be like,
Bam! Here's your procedure, follow it.
and they'll be like,
What procedures?
because they never heard of it, right? So you wouldn't want to be in that position, would you? Therefore, train all your employees and let them know the basics of the ISO or API standards that you're going to be certifying to. Let them know the activities that will be taking place. They might not need to know everything, but they should definitely know that there will be new people, like your new QA manager or HSC manager or the consultants that will be around asking questions, right? And share with them the ultimate goal of getting certified. This will make those employees your allies. It will ensure their buy-in, which is, after all, what we all want, is their buy-in so they can follow this. And it will also set the stage for success, your certification success. Now, let's address the bad guy in the ISO or API certification process, the auditor. Let's assume that you're already in your certification audit and somehow you got here with no training. So, lucky dog, you did it, you're here. Now here comes the hot stepper, the auditor. Good day. According to the API Q1 standard, clause 4.3.2.2b, you should have a procedure to address provision of quality management system training. May I ask now how you have provision QMS training for your employees?
So according to ISO 9001, clause 7.3.c, employees are supposed to be aware of the contribution to the effectiveness of the quality management system. Please show me the evidence that you have made your employees aware or trained in the QMS. According to ISO 45001, clause 9.2.2, auditors need to be objective and impartial. What are the competency requirements for your auditors? May I see evidence that your internal auditors were trained and that have the experience that you require?
Do you see the kind of questions you might be asked by an auditor? So yes, you do need training because training and competency is all part of the requirements of the ISO and the API standards. By training your employees on the ISO and API standards that you are seeking certification, then you are setting the stage for success. So what kind of training do I recommend? I recommend the following. For your employees, about a 2 to 4 hour of general overview training on the standard that you're going to certify to. That should be enough. They don't need a lot, but at least they need the basics. So 2 to 4 hours of good, solid, jam-packed training is good. For the steering committee, I recommend more in-depth training. Definitely formal training. 3 to 4 days should be a good training and implementation of the standard. Plus, you could also have them take the internal auditing techniques type of training, because that gives them the idea of what questions they will be asked. Now, for your auditors, if you're going to do your own internal audits, then I definitely recommend for them implementation training plus internal auditing techniques, because obviously they need to know how to conduct audits and what is expected of them. As I always say, knowledge is power. And once you and your employees are knowledgeable, you will be empowered to steer the system in your favor. Even if you hire an expert champion or an expert consultant, or you're lucky and get the easiest auditor, having knowledge of the standard is key to your management system success. Nobody's perfect, not the auditor, not the consultant. And therefore, with more knowledge, you will be able to call out on this expert's mistake or the auditor's trespasses. Because believe me, they will make mistakes. And in fact, sometimes maybe not just mistakes, but they will try to steer you into or push you into doing something that may not be value added for your company. And so you want to ensure that if somebody pushes the system, it is pushed in your favor. So good luck finding training suitable for your employees and the steering team. And don't forget that periodic training is also important to keep knowledge of the standards sharp. Well, so now that you have been trained on what training is required, and now you're ready to get started, but maybe you don't have idea of which registrar to use in your certification. In this video, I will show you the top 3 letter registrars and which one I recommend. So click here to learn more.